Welcome to Rock That Relationship, a podcast about all things relationship with Corey and Tracy.
Now let's get real and start creating relationships that rock.
If you liked what you heard, check out our show notes for resources from today's episode. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram under Rock That Relationship, and go to our website at rockthatrelationship.com for updated episodes and more great information.
Thanks for listening. Now go rock those relationships.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Rock That Relationship. This season, we are talking all about divorce and how to navigate it, how to survive it, maybe even how to thrive in divorce. And so today's episode is about preparing for divorce. You've made the decision, or the decision has been made that you will be proceeding with a divorce. So we're going to talk about some of the things that are important to consider. And we, Tracy and I, are going to be able to kind of go back and forth with some of our own expertise on things around how to prepare both emotionally and legally for moving into the divorce process. So, Tracy, this is really in your wheelhouse. This is very much so what you do every single day.
Yes, it is. And I've done it on a personal level, too. So I have personal experience and work experience.
There you go. Awesome. Well, and I've never been married, and I've never been divorced, but I was in a registered domestic partnership, and we did have to split assets, and we had a child, we have co-parenting.
And use a mediator.
We used a lawyer as a mediator. So I've been through a lot of these processes myself. And then, of course, just kind of understanding the emotional toll that this can take. Making that decision is really hard. Deciding, sometimes it's like, yes, I want a divorce, or yes, this other person wants one. But other times it's a very emotional process to make that decision. And so how do you blend that emotional process with the kind of tactical things that come next, right? So,
right.
So Tracy, you
kind of need to separate those out, I just want to say. Like, you have to have your emotions separate from the reality of what's happening.
Okay, and why do you say that?
Right?
That's because I agree with you.
Because emotions are so messy, right? And you're going to have a lot of emotions, whether you want the divorce or not. It's still upsetting, right? It's very interesting. I was hiking yesterday with a divorced friend who and you know about her divorce, and her ex really got a lot that he shouldn't have gotten, but that's the law. And when I was helping her as a friend, like, she had a lawyer, but I was helping her as a friend, and it was before I started even doing divorce law. And, I was worked up for her, like, oh my God, you shouldn't be giving him this. He shouldn't get anything. He shouldn't this and that. And then there's the law. So I got her worked up. She didn't actually let herself get that worked up. There were times like she went in and out of being worked up, and a lawyer really can't handle that. And so you need to seek help and guidance elsewhere. It's really not the lawyer's job, and it's very difficult. I actually do both. I do coaching, like help my clients while I'm working on their legal matters, but they're so different. And if the lawyer gets emotionally invested or is getting worked up on your behalf, it makes it harder to do what needs to be done. And it makes it harder on the lawyer too. And a lot of lawyers just don't have those emotional skills, right? So you have to think, it depends if you're even using a lawyer, but the same goes for processing a divorce. You can't really process it with the person you're divorcing. You just need to have your own process apart from that person and relationship.
Mm-hmm.
There are those people who do what is that called? Conscious uncoupling. Great.
Oh.
But I'm sure they use therapists and mediators and all kinds of people to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if they're both very wealthy, if we're talking like Gwyneth Paltrow and Chris Martin, they don't have the fear that a lot of people have of what's going to happen to me, right? No matter what, those people are going to be financially fine. But divorce, here's what I have to say about marriage and divorce. Marriage is super cheap to get into. It's like $98 for the license. Divorce is very hard, right? It's very expensive, and people don't understand, and this is going to become my new life's mission. Like, a marriage is a legal contract, a legally binding contract that takes a lot from people that they don't realize. It may give them stuff, but usually it takes more than it gives.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I like what you're talking about, this idea of separating the emotional and the legal, or even logistical. At that sense is, when we're in the midst of some kind of emotional upheaval in our lives, we can also make really poor or rash decisions.
Exactly.
And so, you could tank an entire process by being overly emotional. And not that you shouldn't be emotional, but it's really important to work with potentially a therapist or a close set of friends or something to help try to diffuse it so that you can at least go in level-headed to the divorce process. But it's hard because, here's the tricky part, and as you talk about how easy it is to get into marriage and how difficult it is to get divorces, at the end of the day, marriage is a legal contract. But the part that makes it different than you and I maybe creating an LLC at some point to do our podcast, there are such emotions. It's like it's a legal binding, love binding, spiritual binding for some people, connection between two people. Right. So when you're uncoupling, you're not just terminating a contract. You are you're trying to figure out how to kind of unlove each other, and that is really hard to balance both.
Yeah, and you don't have to unlove each other, but you do have to be with the other person.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you know how we talk about like if you have trauma, there's trauma that you have to deal with from a breakup sometimes, and there's grief, and those are two separate things. And a divorce is emotional. You have to deal with all of your emotional stuff about the fact that you're getting divorced, but then it's legal, so you need to deal with the legal stuff as well. And so those two just don't go well together, because when you can't break those apart, you do end up making either poor decisions or you drag it out way longer than it needs to be dragged out. And it is fascinating, right? I think maybe hundreds of years ago, maybe 100 years ago, I don't know. I don't think that marriage was a romantic, emotional thing, right? So nowadays, some of us in this world, and there's a lot of cultures that don't, where it is simply legal, right? And where women don't have a lot of rights. But here in the United States right now, it's like, oh, I love you, let's get married, right?
Right.
And so you're now mixing a romantic love, possibly children, and a legal thing all together. So, and also, that's also something that I really want to talk about, is that having children is a legal matter that is going to mess your life up in the case of a messy divorce. So when people think of oh, I'm going to have a child with someone and we're going to have a DNA mix and it's going to come out this beautiful little creature. You and I in past seasons have discussed this. I've been the more romantic one of oh my gosh, I'm married. I'm not that person anymore. And I haven't even been doing this work for a year. But what I've seen is the ugliness with which one parent treats the other and how these children are used as weapons. And it's very, very disturbing. And so, a child isn't just a child, right? It becomes a pawn, and it's very tragic. So you have to think I really believe that there should be a lot more pre-coaching of marriage, like marital counseling. I know there's a lot of religious people who do it for people, but I don't even think they really get into marriage. I went out with a friend the other night who's still married, but once they're separated and living apart, and she's like, is there somebody who can just advise women on what to do? And I'm like, that's me. That's my job, right? So you have to seek help. It's not just, there's so much to be considered, right? And a child isn't just a human being that you love. It becomes I don't want to get too depressing, but I have several cases right now where the children, the one parent clearly does not care about the children, but wants the children and wants something out of the fact that, they can use the children. It's quite tragic. Okay.
Oh. No, it is. And again, it goes back to this idea that this is a legal contract. So when you're preparing for divorce, sometimes people will be, kind of considering oh, this feels just like a regular breakup. We're going to be sad and all this stuff. And then, and then on the other hand, it's no, this is actually untangling a legal mess. I will tell you that even having not been divorced, but been in a domestic partnership, untangling was actually really difficult, because one of the things that marriage affords you is the ability to divorce. And we had to do every one of these processes one by one.
Right.
And not only is it like there's that legal, you're dealing with the legal, you're dealing with the emotional breakup, but you're also dealing with the emotion of untangling. Like that part is emotional. It's like, which car do you want? I don't know. And then you start crying because it's like the car, and then the car has this whole meaning behind it. And you're like, oh my gosh, remember when we took this road trip in this car? And then you're signing over the deed to the car, right? Yes. Or the title to the car. And it's like, so even the legal stuff, prompts this like memory and the emotion. So you're dealing with the emotion of the breakup. You're dealing with the legalities of this. And then you're dealing with the emotion of the legalities, which is almost like this third level of just like trigger. Right. As you go through it. And so you're doing this, and as you're talking about, sometimes people will prolong the divorce for whatever reason. It may be financial, it may just be that one party's dragging their feet, whatever the case is. Some people just are like in and out. I want to be done. I don't want to have this like lingering around, but you're preparing for this. So like, if you think about it, you're going to be getting divorced. At what point, Tracy, would you suggest a mediator over a lawyer, or a lawyer over a mediator?
So mediation is a voluntary process. So both parties have to voluntarily go and actually participate. So, voluntary, like it is interesting. I've done mediations where people were kind of like not so participatory at first. I mean, obviously they agreed to go, right? And it really, I think the mediator, whoever's doing the mediation, it makes a big difference, because I just start mine out with, we don't have to be hating each other. Nobody has to, necessarily like each other, and don't have to be friends. But why do we want to go through this process and make it harder and uglier, and then subject yourself to a judge's, decision versus your own? Like what I always say is, you guys manage your marriage and your children on your own. Why involve lawyers and judges now? So a mediator is simply a facilitator. The mediator has no stake in the outcome whatsoever. And it's really about just helping those two people figure out what is best for them. Mm-hmm. And I would always suggest that if there's not abuse, if there's two people who can still talk to each other, they can mediate amongst themselves. They could have a friend help them. They could just, figure it out and come to an agreement, right? So when you hire a lawyer, the lawyer represents you, and that takes it up a whole nother level. So that can either anger the other person, or the other person also goes and gets a lawyer. Sometimes that's a good thing when you have two lawyers talking to each other, and sometimes it's not. And I've seen some pretty mean other attorneys who are, I think, really make the process so much uglier than it has to be.
Interesting. Well, when I was going through, like I mentioned before, it was a dissolution of a domestic partnership. We just used a friend who was a notary. And so we typed up our own, like, kind of stuff about what we wanted to do, kind of the list of what we wanted to do. And she was the notary for us signing over the cars. She was the notary for us signing over all that stuff. And then, but we had agreed to it without even a mediator, and then got all of that done. Where we ended up using the lawyer was on the co-parenting agreement. And it was not even a lawyer that was in a lawyer capacity. She was a mediator for us, and we both met with her. And then she walked us through how to figure out what we were going to do with co-parenting. And so it was interesting. We even used like a stage before mediator, which was just a friend who was a notary, because we had agreed offline what we wanted to do. It was like, you're going to get this house, I'm going to get this house. Like, we didn't even need a mediator.
But then there was something that your mediator missed, and that I would be very careful. This is my advice, right? Yes. People should not go to it's interesting because yours was a lawyer. But she missed something huge that she shouldn't have, and she should have gotten a bar complaint for that. But I feel like if you're going to do that, it's like therapy. I always talk about therapy. Like, you go to a therapist, but in between each therapy appointment, you need to do your own work. And so if you're getting divorced and all that, you should be researching and learning everything that you can about what the process is that you're going through, and then use the lawyer as an advisor,
Yeah, and that's even cheaper too, because if you go in there and you don't even know anything, and you're like paying a lawyer to basically teach you things that you could have sort of prepared a little bit. Like, what do I need to do to prepare for a divorce? Like you can find some of that stuff online. I wouldn't necessarily like do my divorce that way, but you could be like, oh, I probably need to figure out who's going to get, how retirement is distributed, or how we're going to, just so that you can come in with your list of questions and be prepared to say, okay, these are the 10 things that we are like either at an impasse about or we need mediation around. Can you help us with these things? And that's just doing your due diligence. I think that's really important.
Well, yeah, if you're going into mediation, you kind of should have, each have an idea of what you want, and then you're going to have to compromise, right? But you should have an understanding of what your rights are as far as, what you're entitled to before you go into that. And then if you hire an attorney, it's what you sign, what you agree to. The lawyer's not signing, so you are signing. So you do need to understand what you're entitled to and what the process is, because, lawyers have big caseloads and they're not always paying attention to every little thing, right? So just like when you do your taxes, I hope you don't just turn it over and be like, okay, now it's done. You should have an idea, right, of what you're entitled to or what you need to claim or anything like that. So that you wouldn't just turn it over and let somebody else do that. So it is a process that is extremely overwhelming for people, and their brains shut down, and then it's very hard for them to be that participatory, but it's important that they are.
Well, yeah, and I will tell you two things on that. One is that from my experience with a mediator is that they often will use templates for things. And because it's easier for them to plug in certain things. So my lawyer had used, or our mediator had used like a co-parenting agreement that was a template. And there were things that I didn't like on the template, and she was sort of reluctant to change them because they were her template. I should have pushed a little harder, and I didn't. And so one of the things that I would say is when you're searching for a mediator or a lawyer is to really articulate what it is that you want. Sometimes, I know in your case, Tracy, you'll give people, at least in the lawyer side of things, say like, this is not feasible, or you really should be compromising on this. But in the case of the mediator, it was that she just simply didn't want to change the template, even though we both agreed in a meeting to the terms. She didn't want to change the template, and therefore we were stuck with a few things that certainly weren't not in my best interest. And so it's okay.
That's
and
where
encouraged.
You have to be pushy.
Yeah, you have to know this. And I didn't know what some of those things were. Yeah, I had no idea.
Go through this. I'm not going to do this. And that's the other thing. If people are uncomfortable or they're not, if they don't feel like they're being represented, whatever. There's people have left my representation, or I've let them go because it's not a good fit. And that's not a good fit. If someone's saying like, hey, we don't want this in here, it actually goes against what we're wanting, right? Or something's not in here and it needs to be in here, and they refuse to do it, then forget it. Even file a bar complaint against them, or get your money back, or whatever you have to do, or just walk away. Again, it's just money, right? So it's better to have your rights protected and spend a ton of money. That's the thing. That's the other thing. Mediation is generally less expensive than legal. Usually you pay like a flat fee for the mediation and you get so many hours and the documents done. And then lawyering, you pay by the hour for the lawyer and the paralegal. And it's expensive. And that's just something that you have to accept. It's expensive. And it's very like disheartening sometimes. It's like, people, I get it. So I'm trying not to take it personally that people complaining about their bills and, oh my gosh, this is so expensive and we haven't gotten anywhere. And I'm like, yeah, what you're paying for is the lawyer's time to review it, the lawyer's time, the paralegal's time to write these documents up. It takes a long time to write up documents, it's expensive. And every time you go to work on something, you have to go back and review all the stuff, that goes into it. Am I missing something? Am I, do I need to put this in? I wake up in the middle of the night thinking, okay, about this case and that case, and what do I need to do? And so there's a lot that goes into these things. And again, it's expensive. So prepare yourself. If you're going to go with a lawyer, it's going to get expensive. That's a fact.
Well, and I think about it too, like there are also some things logistically you can do on the front end to potentially reduce those expenses, like getting your affairs in order. Like like getting all the documents that you already have, your trusts, your wills, your retirement accounts, making it very easy to read, easy to sift through. If you just pile a bunch of things randomly on your lawyer's desk and have them have to take the time to try to decipher what in the world they're even looking at, that's difficult. But if you say, here's the 5 things that we need to figure out, here are the numbers, here are the things, that it's just going to make it a lot easier. So, getting your affairs in order is super, super important. And that's also a reflection of, did you have your affairs in order when you were married? I mean, How many of you all out there listening, do you have a will? Do you have a trust? Do you have powers of attorney for medical, for financial? Like, do you have those kinds of affairs in order now? You should be having, if you have children, you should absolutely have those in order. But even otherwise, having those, and then being able to say, okay, when I'm going to go in and get divorced, I need to, we're going to change out my power of attorney, but already knowing who you want that to be. Okay, so in my case, I changed my power of attorney, to my mother. And then when my mother passed, I changed it to my brother. And so just being aware of, like, having all of those answers so that the lawyer doesn't have to spend all that time trying to get those from you.
Right. And those kind of things they don't actually factor into divorce. And you don't need a power of attorney when you're married, because your spouse, that's the purpose of marriage, right? So it being a legal relationship, your spouse is your everything. That's the thing. When you get married, your spouse is the one who can make the decision. Your spouse is the one who will decide if you're in a coma, if they're going to pull the plug or not your parents. So,
but when you get divorced, though,
say otherwise. Well, when you
get divorced, you got to figure out who that person is. That's what I'm saying, is you got to figure it out. Like, when my person, we split up, it became my mother. I had to actually get a special document because I no longer had that person as my power of attorney. So you need to think these things through. Who are your next in line? Because your spouse is by default that person.
Right.
And so there's a lot of little moving parts to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let's shift a little bit from some of the legal stuff. So you're preparing. We've already talked about, do you want to choose a mediator? Do you want a lawyer? Do you want to, how do you get your affairs in order? How, all these kinds of contractual things. What about, telling, like, friends and family, telling the kids, like, your identity is changing. Like, you're now kind of coming out. I was listening to this podcast this morning. I've been following this woman for a really long time on this awesome podcast. And she does this podcast about manifesting. And I followed her for many years, and she had talked about how she manifested this soulmate, and it was amazing, and he's everything. And then I haven't listened for a couple of years, and I tuned in the other day, and she was getting divorced from him. Mm-hmm. But so for the episodes kind of leading up to her revealing that, I listened to them backwards because I listened to the most recent first. And so she's talking about how she's getting divorced and all this stuff. But then I listened to the episode before, and she's like, I'm going through a really difficult time. And then the one before that is like, there's stuff going on in my life. And so I'm kind of doing it in reverse. But she was trying to figure out how to tell her listeners, right? After talking about manifesting for so long and how you can
manifesting a soulmate.
And then now she's getting divorced from that soulmate. And she made a really good case as to your soulmate doesn't have to be like forever and all this stuff. But at the same time, she was really nervous about how she was going to tell her listeners. And then I think about it just on an everyday level. How do you tell people? How do you tell your friends, your family, the kids? So I know, Tracy, you've been through a divorce. You've also helped people through divorces. Like, how did you go about doing this, or how have you seen this done?
I think you just have to just tell people, be upfront, and don't be hiding anything. And it depends on your kid's age, how you do it, right? How you approach it with them. And I mean, when I was getting divorced, we just told the kids, and then later I wrote them a poem I wrote that poem, and we read it. And then I actually wrote one to my ex-wife also. And, things were fine for 10 months after we separated, but then, everything went to hell. And I still don't know even what happened, but I think, like, you just have to, it depends on the kid's age. It depends on your relationship with your friends. I mean, you and I have a difference of opinion on this probably, but I mean, everyone's got to tell whoever they want when they want to. You know what I mean? Like, I just tell, I mean, I don't know. I don't even really feel like, I mean, if you're talking to a friend, say, oh, we're getting divorced. Like, why?
Straightforward. Just straightforward.
Yeah, like right. Like, what else is there to say? I mean, we're getting divorced. And then it's like up to you whether you want to go into your own business, right?
Right. Well, and I think about the ordering too. Like, because, that stuff is like gossip. People tell other people. So I would hate to have
people gossip about you anyway.
But I'm just saying I don't want people, like, I would hate for my brother to find out because of some distant friend that told him. I'd rather tell him first. So, the ordering to me is important, like telling my inner circle first and those people that I trust. And then if it filters out, it doesn't really matter, like, at that point. But finding those few people, but you're also likely not just telling them to inform them, you're also telling them to reach out for support because you're going through a very traumatic time. And I can imagine that you probably wouldn't say something, but I know some people get kind of maybe embarrassed or ashamed, or they feel like a failure, and that's like some of the first feelings that come up with divorce. And it's like, I don't want to have to admit that to people around me, that I couldn't, here I am again, I couldn't make another relationship work, especially if you've been, in a more than one relationship or married more than once. And so, but I agree, like, honesty, just saying, hey, this is what's going on. I think that's
and that's when you find a decent therapist, or you understand the nature of relationships, which is, they don't always last. I mean, that's just a fact. And this is coming from, when I was in high school, I thought, I'm going to find that one true love and we're going to be together forever. And that has not worked out. But I'm best friends with somebody I was with for 8 years. I'm very close to somebody else I was with for 5 years. And, sometimes things just aren't meant to be. And sometimes you just learn a lesson from the relationship. So if you find that you're like beating yourself up over the fact that you're getting divorced, you should get help from a supportive and decent therapist and your friends. And if friends are dicks and they're going to say like, oh my God, you're getting a divorce and all that, then don't even talk to them. I mean, that's the other thing about like having boundaries in your life. Like, don't have people in your life who aren't supportive. I mean, these are facts. More than 50%, it's probably much higher, get divorced, And that's why the more, how do I say this? There's a whole movement in this country that is trying to deprive people of getting divorced and returning to fault divorce, which is extremely disturbing, and that's going to hurt women more than it's going to hurt anybody else. Fault divorce is actually a great thing. It's time to not be together anymore. And people need to calm down about that, And then there's movements across the world, not just in the United States, but now in the United States too, about, oh my God, we're not having enough babies. Well, isn't that a woman's choice if she's going to have a baby or not? So, I mean, marriage has been used traditionally. I think we have to look at what marriage actually is and what it's been used for and who it's been used to subjugate.
Yeah. Well, Well, and kind of going off this nature of this idea that there's, the one person that you're going to be with for the rest of your life, and there's the societal expectation that you are in this relationship forever. There's no need to even worry about divorce. Who cares about if it's fault or no fault? If you're going to be with that one person forever, you're never even going to need to get divorced. And this idea that somehow that these shorter relationships, right, these not lifelong ones, are somehow failures. And yes, I mean, many people could probably track back to at least one relationship that was probably a bad call, right? Like, not a really good one. But, a lot of times, even shorter relationships doesn't mean that anything was a failure. And so I think part of it too is when you're thinking about telling people that you're getting divorced, it's not about being a failure. It's quite the opposite. It's about being able to say, here are my boundaries. Here's what I want to be happy in life. And this isn't making me happy. And maybe the divorce was somebody else's choice too, but you're also going to adapt to it and rise and thrive from it. And so that's the thing too.
Yeah, and couldn't it be more of a failure to stay in something that makes you unhappy?
Yes, exactly.
Right? So, but people don't want to say that. That to me is failure. I told you that lady who I see like in my neighborhood now, we're not friends anymore because she had a meltdown at me, but she said, you lesbians just seem to leave over the littlest thing. And I'm like, well, you seem to stay in spite of horribleness. You're out here saying such nasty things about your husband, and I barely know you. Like, why would you stay in a relationship where you're out telling people you barely know, even telling people you know well, these awful things and your unhappiness? Like, if you're unhappy, leave. Why would you stay in something you're unhappy in?
And I mean, I know some people have like financial reasons, but you could try to find ways around that stuff. Prepare. If
get a second job.
Exactly. You're unhappy and you really want to leave and you have the ability to leave. Let's be very clear. We're talking about non-abusive relationships here. But if you have the ability to leave, preparing yourself, lining things up, being able to prepare so that you can have that second job, you can have a place to live, you can go somewhere. But I totally have shifted my mindset on this. I'm like, I may spend the rest of my life going from one relationship to the next. I have no idea, but I don't see that as a failure. I see that as seasons of my life. And as I grow and change and I want something different, I am strong enough and confident enough that what I'm in maybe isn't serving me well, and to move to something else. And it doesn't have anything to do with how committed I am, because I don't believe commitment and staying in something that isn't serving you are one and the same. I think commitment is seeing things through, but not when it comes to your day-to-day happiness and your ability to just thrive and be. I don't think that even makes sense to me.
Okay, and that's the thing, right? You can be emotionally committed to a person and never enter into a legal relationship with them. Never cohabitate and never mix your Netflix account and your phone and all that stuff, right? Like, that's the thing. That's where I want to get to, is to have just that relationship without any kind of entanglement. I mean, I just went through that with the last relationship, and we still are on the phone plan together, and I was cut off the Netflix right in the middle of a show, right? Like, so, and that was out of anger, right? So I don't want to do that anymore. I've said this many times, like, I have my house now, and I don't want anyone to be able to come into my house and tell me I have to leave it. So I'm never, ever, ever putting myself in that situation again. And I'm not going to put myself in the situation of sharing Netflix. I don't care. I don't care if it costs me more money. I don't care if I have to go without the Netflix, or if I have to get a second job to pay for it. I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want anyone having control over me and what I have access to anymore. And I've never been in, I'm not saying I've never been in a controlling relationship. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, when you put your, like, okay, let me share this. Let's do this together. You're willingly doing that, and then you're entangling yourself into something that's going to be hard to get out of. And I don't know why in this society we can't say, hey, everyone just live independently, and then if you want to have a love relationship with someone, or, you move in together, but everybody keep their own property or whatnot to protect themselves, or understand that when it ends, one of you is going to have to leave, right? And so I'm never going to get rid of my house unless I decide, okay, I am selling it, I'm getting my van, or I'm moving abroad, or whatever. I'm not going to sell something to move in with somebody else and then be screwed when it doesn't work out.
Right. Well, and this is, you and I have both had experiences where we've had shared properties, we've had children involved, we've had all these kinds of things, and I feel like in some ways we've become a lot more informed the next time around. And then I think about, when I was in my 20s and I partnered up with the person, and thought this was my forever person, we mingled everything because we had this, like, just, kind of doughy-eyed view of the world. And then trying to get out of it was untangling. And so now I know for, like, the next time around, and I have not married, I have not commingled finances.
Yeah, and I used to think you were so cynical, and I didn't like it. But honestly, look, I got this job 9 months ago now, and I have completely come around to your way of thinking. Nothing to do, well, okay, sort of with my own personal life in that meantime, but also with this work.
Yeah.
I'm not making this stuff up. And I'm not making these people's lives harder. Like, I'm trying to settle their cases without a ton of expense in court, and it's almost impossible. Let me just tell you, if you're with somebody who's a jerk, they will find a jerk lawyer. They will find a jerk lawyer. So
what do you do? Do you find a jerk lawyer too to fight back?
No, you need to find a lawyer that. One of our questions on here is what to consider when hiring a lawyer. You need to find a lawyer that jives with you. Jives, or jiving, or vibes with you. Like, you have to don't find a jerk lawyer. Find somebody who can actually support you through the process. So the friend I was talking about earlier, she had a lawyer that, she wasn't sure if the woman was going to be, like, hardcore enough. And the facts were the facts. It's 50-50, whether her ex-husband worked or not, or contributed as much as her or not. That's what they get. The person can be the laziest person on earth and sit in your house for 10 years and then get half of what you're worth. Just FYI.
I know. So I feel like we need to do
property state.
We needed to do a season all about before you get married, ... because a lot of this stuff that we're talking about getting divorced is like, people have already done this, right? They've already commingled finances. They've already shared a Netflix account, and now we're trying to help them get out of it.
We need to reach the next generation, Miss Gen Z, before they step into these traps. But here's the thing. You got to choose a lawyer that is going to make you feel good, okay?
Right.
And also you have to decide, is some stuff worth fighting over? Probably not. Who cares at some point? I mean, I walked away from a lot of money. Do I wish I had that money? Yes. But if I could look back and say, what would it have cost me to get that money? And I'm not talking financial, I'm talking emotional, all that, it wouldn't be worth it, right? I have peace in myself for the way that I acted. And so you need to find a lawyer who works with you. And so I had a client who legitimately wanted to hide income, wanted me to engage in that, and I got rid of him right away because I'm not doing that, right? So, and I tell people my whole thing is to try and settle your case amicably.
Well, I mean, that's the best way of doing it.
You want someone hardcore.
Right. Well, and think about it amicably too. A lot of your clients, and just even in my case, it was we had to do it amicably because we have a child. And, I mean, it is so much easier to co-parent with someone that you, A, don't hate, B, didn't take advantage of or have them take advantage of you, and you just kind of went through the process. It is so much easier to do that because this person is going to be in your life forever. So what you do, my parents had a really messy divorce. I mean, really messy. And, I was going back and forth between houses and
Did they have lawyers?
They had lawyers. Oh, yeah. And it was...
So here's the question about that, right? Did the lawyers make that situation worse? Or did your parents get lawyers who were doing, your parents wanted that?
Probably a little of both. I mean, they were very angry. There was so much anger there that I can see how it could have escalated with or without the lawyers. But I was also pretty young, so I don't know. But I know that divorce went years and years. And it was it was probably 2 years, maybe 3 years of the divorce. And it was so much anger and hostility. I was almost just who cares who gets what? Just please stop.
Right. Well, it's interesting that as a child you felt that, right? And that's the other thing. Children feel a lot. They know what's going on. No matter how old they are, they're aware of everything. People think they're hiding stuff from their kids, but they're not. And when I say I want to settle everything amicably, I do have clients who have orders of protection, and there are bad people trying to get at them and their kids. So that's different. So that's the other half of my caseload where I do not bend on those things. And I have gotten people's parenting rights taken away, and I'm very happy about that because they engaged in terrible things against their children. That's a totally different thing. But if it's two somewhat normal people, you should want it to be resolved amicably. But that's what I'm saying. People gravitate towards the lawyer that is similar to their personality, right? So when my friend was asking, should she switch lawyers? And I'm like, well, do you like her? Really, that's what matters. The law is the law, and there's not much that you can do about that, right? And so do you like the person? Are they supportive of you? Are they making you feel good or crappy? I mean, that really, I had a lawyer in the 90s, and I liked her. I paid her a lot more than any of my clients have paid me. And, I could look back at that whole case, and it was horrible. It was written up in the Seattle Times. It was, a case of first impression in the United States. And I couldn't have gone through that without somebody that I liked, on a personal level. So you got to find somebody that you like on a personal level. And there are just like relationships, I'm not going to go to a singles mixer and like every person there. I'm not going to go to look at lawyers online or therapists online and like everyone. I think that's what people don't get. And I've heard that about therapists too. It's well, I don't like this therapist. Well, then don't go to that person. Why would you go back to someone you don't like? And who cares? You don't like that person. I don't like everybody. Everybody doesn't like you. You're not going to like every lawyer. You know what I mean? You're not going to like every therapist. So find somebody that you actually like. And our law firm, I work for a law firm, and everything is virtual. I won't meet with people in person unless we're going to court or something like that are already established clients, because I'm not wasting my time meeting somebody I don't know who's not going to do Zoom. Like, there are some people who don't want to do Zoom. I'm not going to do that. It's not going to happen. So it's not worth my time. And then I want clients who are not going to make things more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Right.
And we met that lady this week at the book fair, and I bought her book, which I haven't read a book in ages. I just listened to audiobooks, but it's called Raging from Within, De-Escalating Angry People. And the reason I bought that is because it made me think of one of my clients right away. And I don't want my clients being angry. Like, I try to help them work through that. So, like, my goal as a lawyer is I want your life to be better at the end of this. You might not be richer. You might be poorer, but your life should be better. Like, you should feel at peace.
Right.
Because the facts are the facts. You know what I mean? And you know when you talk about your parents dragging that on, whatever, and the anger was from each of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they chose not to let go of that anger, and that's that whole thing about drinking the poison and then thinking it will kill the other person. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that is the whole thing about Buddhism, of letting go of attachment. I mean, and I don't know if I've talked about this on this podcast, but I've talked about it with my clients. Don't fight the hypo. In law school, they give you a hypothetical and they tell you, blah, 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 this is what happened. You can't fight the hypothetical. You can't say, well, I don't want those facts, right? Oh, mm-hmm. It shouldn't be like, it is. It is like this. You are getting divorced. Accept it, and now move on and get the things handled that need to be handled. And then if you need to go to a rage room on the weekend or whatever, then do that. Mm-hmm. But if you continue to live in years and years, I have a client who I'm like, you have got to just get away from this person and stop caring. Like, okay, the guy is a sociopath narcissist. You're not going to change that. And sitting here wondering why he's doing this or why he's doing that, who cares? Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter. Just be done. Just cut your losses and go. Because trying to, like, figure out why he's doing this or how can you get a little more or this or that, personally, I don't think it's worth it. But that's me.
I mean, the emotional toll that takes. I mean, people will fall on the sword for, an extra $500 for something, but will have spent $10,000 in legal fees to do it just to stick it to the other person. And you're not really kind of sticking it to them. In the end, you're sticking it to yourself because you're carrying this anger. And not that people don't have the right to be angry. You have the right to feel whatever you feel during a divorce. But if you hold on to it for too long, all it does is hurt you. It doesn't do anything to anyone else, and it prevents you from moving along. And that is a really difficult thing. And so that's where therapy really comes in, is finding ways to transition out of kind of each
therapy
of the
or coaching.
Well, either one, and talking to anybody who can help you just move forward, right? And like say, why are you holding on to this? Because like with my parents that were angry, I don't know why they were angry, but I would speculate. My mom felt she had been wronged by my dad, but then my dad likely felt like he had been taken advantage of in the divorce proceedings, where he was having to hand over more than he wanted to. So they were both angry for different reasons, but it created so much hostility. And it was like, this doesn't do anybody, didn't do them any good, because that's why the divorce took so long, because they were screaming over like little tiny things by the end. And like I said before, it just impacted us so as children. And it's like at some point you have to let go, cut your losses, and move on. And that's the part about marriage, is some people come into marriage and they leave with more than they came with. That is a fact. But you also can't depend on that. You might leave your marriage with less than you had because, you combined stuff, or somebody fell on hard times and whatever, your income went down, and who knows. But the reality is you can't see it as kind of a lucrative outcome. It is what it is.
Well, that's exactly right. And you may leave your relationship with less than you had when you went into it. And that is a fact. So you really need to think about that. And I was thinking about again this morning, my house, and do I want to leave it? Would I leave it? Blah, 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 all that. And then I was like, I don't want to leave it and then have less than I had before. Right. So at least I have this. And at least I don't have to move any of the stuff in it anymore, and it's exactly the way I want it. So, like, you have, if you're going to enter into something, it should be something that benefits you. But understand that marriage may not benefit you. It may impoverish you. Getting divorced may impoverish you. And also, when you marry someone, just FYI, all debt is community debt. So if and in a community property state, if your partner is some kind of gambler or some kind of whatever spender like crazy, and you're on the hook for all that, just FYI. So congratulations, Corey. I've come around to your way of thinking.
Oh my gosh, it only took 9 seasons for you to get here.
I know.
Yeah. I mean, it's true, but this, some of the cautionary advice or some of the cautionary tales, I guess you would say, that you and I can both provide about kind of entering into the contract to begin with, doesn't necessarily totally prevent people who are going through divorce from these things, but it does prevent people who have gone through divorce and are considering a second or third or whatever marriage to say, wait a minute, I'm going to do it differently, because I think that's a really important point, is to know what you would do differently, but also knowing that if you believe so wholeheartedly in some of these principles, you can use them in the divorce process in your own thinking. You can say, okay, independence is really important for me. So you know what? Independence might mean that we don't continue. Like at one point, my ex and I decided we were going to share the house that we owned and keep it as a rental forever and manage it forever, and then use that money for our daughter's college fund. And then we realized that independence was really important for us moving forward, that we opted to not do that. And so thinking about how moving forward and what you want can actually help you make decisions about what happened in the past, right? And the decisions you're about to make in the divorce process.
Well, that's very important. And that's the thing, is you have to figure out what is important to you, what means the most. And as I tell every client, that's what Susie Orman, the financial guru, says, is that the purpose of money is security. It doesn't matter what you do with the money if it makes you feel secure. And that's personal to each person, right? Mm-hmm. So I might have a different level of security than you do. And so if I'm using my money in a way that's making me feel nervous or anxious, then that's not good, right? And so for me, having a place to live as I'm divorcing might be more important than getting more money, or like, is it totally equal or whatever? Like, there are some intangibles that you can end up with, right? And that's what people really need to think about, is like, what is going to make me feel secure? And Susie Orman also says, don't make any big decisions, 6 months or a year. I think she says a year after death or divorce, Just sit and calm down, which is a lesson that I learned from you as well.
I know, after every breakup, well, I say every breakup as if you do it all the time, but...
Well, I've had 3 breakups since I met you.
Well, and I met you had actually your divorce, because you had just gotten that.
Right, so divorce and 3 breakups.
I've been around with you post 4 relationships, and every time I've said, sit for 6 months and don't make any drastic moves.
What do? I scream and rage and say, I'm leaving and getting out of here. But I've done it down. But I listened to you, and I have, and look at my life.
I know.
It's pretty nice.
Well, you were more secure. I mean, that's the thing is, it's like sometimes you make these rash decisions, not you, but people make these rash decisions. And it's like, at some point you want, maybe reinvention, and we'll talk about that, and, along the way on the season.
But you could do that a couple years down the road, right? In the meantime, you need to, what is it? It's the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You need to provide for your needs first. Security, housing, food, that kind of thing. The rest can come later. And I said this already before, like, it takes 2 to 3 years to recover financially, emotionally, and physically from a divorce.
Yeah.
And people shouldn't just bounce and jump and, like, take your time. And in between relationships, figure out who you are, what you want, and how you can maintain independence even when you enter that next relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Because all people should be independent. All functioning adults should be independent.
Right. And when you meet somebody and you get into a relationship, you can become interdependent at the same time.
Yes. And you can love someone without entering into a legal contract with them. Exactly. You can love them for the rest of your life. You can take care of them. You don't have to screw yourself. Because what happens is if it doesn't turn out to be your soulmate, or if it does turn out your soulmate, the shit just didn't work out, and then they turn mean, now you're really in trouble.
Right. Or even you just both parties just want out. There's, even if in the most amicable of divorces, there's still grief. There's still trauma because you're going through a huge change. Somebody's leaving the house, or both people are leaving it. And it's a huge upheaval, even in the very best cases of divorce. And so, although that's what we would want, is the best case scenario, the reality is that it's huge. And so it is a contract that has to be undone.
Yes. And one more thing before we close, when you said about the house, like, rather than, keeping it as a rental, like, some people could do that and be great, right? Mm-hmm. But you want independence. I have a client who's going through that now, where they're staying in the house together, even though they're separated. And I said, okay, but we need to think of if one of you or both of you decide you want independence, like, how we need to write that in. How's that going to work, right? Mm-hmm. Because people can say at the beginning, oh, let's hang around together, but that becomes very difficult, especially as both parties want to date again. Mm-hmm. And so you need to think steps ahead. And that is what a lawyer is good for. Okay. Like, people think we're catastrophizers, but we're just reality based in what are the possibilities.
Exactly. So there's a lot to think about, in prepping for divorce. So, we talked a lot about the contract pieces. If you're going to go into another relationship, thinking about maybe, are there different ways of doing it, but also thinking about what you're looking for in a lawyer or a mediator, how effective that can be. Also this idea of telling other people and the idea that, just kind of being straightforward and letting people know that you're getting divorced. You can find great deal of support from others. And really there's nothing to be ashamed of at all. It's absolutely
it's just a fact.
It's a fact. You're moving on, and you have the strength and the courage to be able to say, this isn't working, or accept from the other person to say this isn't working, but really realizing that you are going to move forward and thrive, but you have to let yourself thrive. So you have to let the anger go at some point. You have to let that stuff go so you can move forward.
Because holding on to anger is not thriving. Holding on to hurt and all that isn't. And I will tell you, I've been hurt a lot in my life, and I've been angry a lot in my life, and letting go of all of that has made my life 1,000 times better. As has, going through the therapeutic process about trauma is really, really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Very freeing and peaceful. And
it is. It is freeing and peaceful. And I'm on to my next step of life, which I'll explain next season. But I'm very excited about it, because it's going to involve microdosing in ayahuasca. That's my new thing. Yeah, I'm psyched. But one more thing that we were going to talk about that you wanted to talk about was the no contact while prepping. So what do you mean by that? And I think we'll probably come out on different sides of this.
Yeah, well, just while you're in the legal space, you might have a lawyer, I might have a lawyer, whatever. Say you and I are divorcing each other, although that would mean that at some point we were married, which would never happen.
We were married in a past life.
We were married in a past life. But, the idea would be, sometimes it's helpful to get some distance. So, if you have to co-parent, that's one thing. I had to, we had to do drop-offs and pickups and all that. But we picked neutral places to do that, so that it was like drop-off at school and then pick up at school, so we didn't actually have to confront each other. But this idea of just, creating some emotional space away from each other, and also the non-temptation of trying to negotiate outside of the legal process that you've committed to, or the mediation process that you've committed to. So if you've committed to working through a mediator, then have those conversations with a mediator, not in the parking lot of the school, and trying to, next thing getting into an argument about who's going to take the baby seat and who's not. And the next, so my whole point was just having a little distance during that time, so you can kind of get both your head and your heart in the place to be most effective. Do we disagree?
No, we actually agree.
Oh my God, what? We have to end on that. No, we totally agree on something. Well, out the gate, we agree on something.
Yeah.
So
there we go. Perfect. Now That's perfect ending time. So I can go on and spend my day writing motions and responses to mean lawyers.
Okay. Well, I hope you enjoy your day.
No, I won't.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Tracy, for the great conversation, and for all of our listeners out there. Until our next episode, go out there and rock those relationships. If you liked what you heard, check out our show notes for resources from today's episode. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram under Rock That Relationship, and go to our website at rockthatrelationship.com for updated episodes and more great information.
Thanks for listening. Now go rock those relationships.
If you liked what you heard, check out our show notes for resources from today's episode. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram under Rock That Relationship, and go to our website at rockthatrelationship.com for updated episodes and more great information.
Thanks for listening. Now go rock those relationships.